Sorry. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala, thumma amma ba'd. So inshallah today we have Bab al-Rida or Manazil al-Rida, the chapter of Rida, or the station of Rida, contentment or serene acceptance of Allah's decrees. And inshallah, when we talk in detail about Rida, it's not just the acceptance of the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's being generally content with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being generally pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not just the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we will talk about Salat al-Khawf and Salat al-Jumu'ah. In fiqh, inshallah, in the second session, we will talk about Salat al-Khawf and Salat al-Jumu'ah, the prayer of fear, and inshallah we will not finish Salat al-Jumu'ah today, but we will start because that chapter is longer than most of the chapters. So we will try to divide it. Salat al-Khawf, the chapter on the prayer of fear, is a short one. We will finish that one first and then embark on the next chapter, which will be on Salat al-Jumu'ah or the Jumu'ah prayer. So the station of Rida or Manzilat al-Rida, or the chapter on contentment, Imam al-Harawi rahimahullah ta'ala said in his book Manazil As-Saa'ireen, قال الله تعالى آياته النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية. Allah Almighty said, O reassured soul, return to your Lord, well pleased and pleasing to Him. Well pleased and pleasing to Him. Radiyah, well pleased, Mardiyah, Radiyah, pleasing to Him, and Mardiyah, well pleased. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah talked about the reassured or the tranquil. Al-Mutma'inna sometimes is translated as tranquil, sometimes it's translated as assured or reassured soul. And basically, nafs is divided into al-lawama, al-amara bis-su', and al-mutma'inna. And they are not completely distinct from each other. Al-amara bis-su', the one that commands evil. Al-lawama, the reproaching soul, the one that blames you for your mistakes, that corrects you, that basically that is looking after your best interest. And then a nafs al-mutma'inna, which is a nafs that's tranquil, that is serene. And basically that they're not distinct. You could go through phases where one of them overtakes the others inside you, until you reach a phase where your nafs becomes completely mutma'inna, like Abu Bakr as-Siddiq or someone. And the nafs is completely mutma'inna, and it had already suppressed al-amara bis-su' completely. But then Imam al-Harawi rahimahullah said here, لم يدع في هذه الآية للمتسخط إليه سبيلا. He, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, did not leave any path to him for the resentful. Mutasakhit is the resentful one, the one who shows resentment. So Allah did not leave any path to him for the resentful one, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invited back to him nafs al-mutma'inna. Arji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyya. Return to your soul, pleasing and well pleased. Pleasing and well pleased. So, and Imam Ibn al-Qayyim comments on this and says that this is more about nafs al-mutma'inna. Nafs al-mutma'inna is the one who is accepted, who is invited to eternity in paradise, and ma'ayyat Allah Azza wa Jal, to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for eternity in paradise. So the invitation is extended to a nafs al-mutma'inna. When it comes to a rida, rida is basically the consequence of being invited, because once you have been invited to eternity in paradise, then you will have complete contentment, final contentment. but Imam al-Harawi is trying to say that, that this is also a contingency, that this is also a condition for this invitation to be extended to you. To have this rida is also a condition for this invitation to be extended to you. He said, وَشَرْطُ الْقَاصِدِ الدُّخُولِ فِي الرِّضَى. وَشَرْطُ الْقَاصِدِ الدُّخُولِ فِي الرِّضَى, which means, and he made contentment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made contentment a condition for the seeker. Shart al-qasid, the condition for one to be a seeker of this path is ad-dukhul fi rida, to enter into contentment. That is basically to enter into the station of contentment. Imam al-Harawi is trying to say here that no one will have this invitation extended to him until he is pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's content with Allah and content with the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's making it a condition. So he's probably siding with scholars who consider rida to be wajib. And certainly there are certain forms of rida that are wajib. One of them is to be pleased with Allah as your Lord. That is wajib. But rida is not one thing. Rida is an enormous station. And rida is, part of rida is essential for you to be even called Muslim. But part of rida is a quality that cannot be attained but by the messengers and prophets and the Siddiqeen and the greatest of mankind. Part of rida may not be attainable by the ordinary Muslim, may not be attainable even by most of the seekers. That type of rida, the ultimate rida, is not simple, it is not easy, as the Sheikh will explain, inshallah ta'ala. So, some of the rida is kasbi and some of the rida is wahbi. Kasbi means acquired. Wahbi means granted. Some of the rida is kasbi. You can acquire that rida. And the rida that is wajib is kasbi, because Allah would not burden a soul beyond its capacity. So whatever Allah makes wajib on you is kasbi. You could get to a certain level of rida by kasb, by training, by riyada, which is spiritual exercise. You could get to a certain level of rida through kasb, training, acquisition, riyada, exercise, and so on. And certainly you could get even more. You can get even more than the wajib rida. You could get to levels of the mustahab or the recommended rida through kasb. And it requires a great deal of training and a great deal of sabr also until you get to those levels. But some of the rida is wahbi, and it is granted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is not acquired by you. Allah gives it to you. And basically the ultimate, the highest levels of rida are wahbi, not kasbi. You don't get to them through more training, but you will have to be granted those higher levels by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you seek them through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because you can't just attain them. Some of the rida that is kasbi is even is open to Muslim and non-Muslim. It is sometimes open to believer and non-believer. It's just a matter of acceptance without agitation, acceptance without resentment of the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or your share of things in this dunya, your share of goods and enjoyments in this dunya. And that is kasbi, and it is kasbi even to non-Muslims, even to non-believers. They can acquire a certain level of contentment and a certain level of acceptance, but the highest levels of rida will not be acquired except through a grant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the Shaykh said, وَالرِّضَى اسْمٌ لِلْوُقُوفِ الصَّادِقِ حَيْثُمَا وُقِفَ الْعَبْدِ Contentment is a name for the sincere compliance of the servants by standing where they are placed. So الرضا اسم للوقوف الصادق حيثما وقف العبد. It means that wherever you are placed, you stay there. You stay put wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places you. You do not seek to change your condition without His permission and without His guidance. لا يلتمس متقدما ولا متأخرا. He does not, without seeking any advance or retreat. ولا يستزيد مزيدا ولا يستبدل حالا. And without seeking any increase or recourse or change of state. لا يستبدل حالا. وهو من أوائل مسالك أهل الخصوص وأشقها على العامة وهو على 3 درجات. It is of the beginning stations of the path of the elites and of the hardest ones on the commoners, and it is 3 levels. The أهل الخصوص are the elites, the special ones. And the special seekers, the seekers who have gone through enough riyada or spiritual training and exercise to the point where they have separated themselves or distanced themselves from the commoners, the masses, the public, the rest of us. You know. So he's saying that for Ahl al-Khusus, it is of the beginning stations. Rida is not of the final stations, it's of the beginning stations. You have to understand the Sheikh, and you have to understand where he's coming from. And that is how you will have a better understanding of his classifications and things of that nature. Sheikh is always basically what dominates his thought is the concept, is the thought of self-annihilation. So you cannot reach the final stages of any, or the final phases of any station, or the final stages of any one of any condition, or any state, or any station, unless your ego had completely passed away, which is, his sort of concept of self-annihilation, his concept of fana. Your ego needs to pass away completely, and then when your ego passes away, he's telling you that when your ego passes away, you will not have rida, because you're not there to have. It is that level, that 3rd level, is a rida bi rida Allah. It is to be pleased with the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the concept of your ego passing away, we did talk about this so many times, but because the Sheikh always comes back to it. We have to always come back to it, because every time we may have people that are here for the first time. Concept of al-fana, you could consider the sanctioned type of fana, which is the complete conformity of your will to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your will completely conforming to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until you desire not but which He desires. That is the sanctioned concept of fana. Fana in the sense of complete self-annihilation, existential self-annihilation, is not possible because you will always be the creature, and Allah will always be the creator. And there is always a difference between the creature and the creator. And you will always have a separate will, because if your will is the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you're part of the divine, and we're not part of the divine. So in the existential sense, it is not possible, nor is it attainable, nor can anyone reach this and lose feelings completely of the self, have no feelings of the self. But fana, where your self passes away in the sense of your will is completely conforming to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you wish not or desire not, but with that which He wishes and desires for you. And you live through Him, for Him, by Him. That is, living through Him, by Him, for Him, that is the next phase, which is baqa. So you could consider fana to be your bridge to baqa. Fana, which is yourself passing away, your ego passing away, you suppressed your ego enough that your ego desires not but which he desires not but which he decreed for you, subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is your bridge, that is your jism, and you cross this jism into al-baqa, which is subsistence. It is to live by him, with him, for him. To live by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, billah, ma'allah, lillah. To live by Allah, with Allah, for Allah. And that is the ultimate existence, that is the purpose of our creation. And that is the ultimate station, to live by Allah, with Allah, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when he starts here to divide the stations of rida, he will tell you that the first rida is to be pleased with Allah as your Lord. Where is he coming from? And the second is to be pleased with his decrees, which is, he considers this to be higher. And the third is to be pleased with the pleasure of Allah, that is after yourself, your ego have completely passed away. So you're not there, you're not entitled, you're not a receptacle of pleasure or resentment or anything, because you're basically not there. Your will have vanished into the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That classification, to be pleased with Allah as the first level, you could say that Imam al-Harawi has a point here. Imam al-Qayyim goes in much detail in talking about how this first level should be the highest level in Madaarij As-Saalikeen. But where Imam al-Harawi is coming from is that part of this level overlaps all the other levels. This level is not the first level where you basically transition from it to the second level, to be pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To be pleased with Allah overlaps all of the levels. But without being pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as your Lord, you have no iman, you have no faith. So Imam al-Harawi felt that he needed to start here. That not every believer is content with the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at least every believer should be content with Allah as their Lord, right? So he's saying that this is the foundation. This is where we have to start, to be pleased with Allah as your Lord. And then in the second level, he will talk about how some of the believers will be pleased with all of the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will be pleased with all of the decrees. So he's saying that this is like an additional, this is a higher level of iman. This is not the basic level of iman. The basic level of iman is just to be pleased with Allah as your Lord. But Imam al-Qayyim would come back and say that being pleased with the Lordship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala entails being pleased with His decrees and exceeds that as well, because it is also being pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is having pleasure with Allah, having contentment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as sufficient for you, as your Lord, sufficient to you. Anyway, you get the point, everyone. Why is there disagreement? Because these levels are not distinct from each other. It is not that you transition from one to the other. You're still in the first station while you are dealing with the second, or when you're training in the second station. And when you move to the third station, you're still in the first station. So Imam al-Harawi said, Daraja al-Ula rida al-Amma. And because before this, he said, Ashaqquha al-Amma, it is the hardest, it is of the hardest stations of the commoners, because the commoners, the public, it is very hard for them to be pleased with things that are beyond their comprehension, or with things that are, counter to their desires, counter to their appetites. Because most of the public use their appetitive self, not their rational self or their emotional self. That philosophical division of the self. But most of the public use the appetitive self to determine what they like and what they don't like. Most of the people like sugar, regardless of what it would do to them. Most of the people, use the appetitive self to determine what they like and what they don't like. So it is very hard for the people to have this station of rida, because they are inclined to using the appetitive self. Then he will say, الدرجة الأولى رضا العامة. The first level is رضا العامة, وهو الرضا بالله ربا وتسخط عبادة ما دونه. الدرجة الأولى, the first level, رضا العامة, the rida of the commoners, the public. وهو الرضا بالله ربا, which is being pleased with Allah as the Lord. وتسخط عبادة ما دونه, and resenting the worship of anything else. Resenting the worship of anything else. وهذا قطب رحى الإسلام. And this is the pole or the hinge or the axis of Islam. The pole of the mill of Islam, meaning the axis of Islam or the hinge of Islam. Islam hinges on this rida. The mill of Islam will not work if there is no, the mill and the middle pole in the mill, and have you ever seen something like this? Okay, if you did not see it, consider this to mean the hinge of Islam. The Islam hinges on this. وهو يطهر من الشرك الأكبر, and it purifies from the major shirk. وهو يصح بثلاثة شروط, and it is validated by 3 conditions. أن يكون الله عز وجل أحب الأشياء إلى العبد, that Allah is the most beloved thing to the servant. وأولى الأشياء بالتعظيم, and that He is the most glorified thing to Him, most deserving of glorification. وأحق الأشياء بالطاعة, and that He is the most deserving of His obedience. Basically, the hadith of al-Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib that's reported by Muslim, ذاق طعم الإيمان ورضي بالله ربنا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم نبيا ورسولا. He will have the taste of faith. من رضي بالله ربا, he is pleased with Allah as his Lord, or content with Allah as his Lord, with Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم as his prophet, and with Islam as his deen, or with Islam as his deen, and with Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم as his prophet. That is the first level, and it is the final level as well. It is the first and it is the final. There are degrees of being content with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as your Lord, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as your messenger, and Islam as your deen. The basic level of this contentment is your pass into Islam. You don't get like in the religion without some acceptance of Allah as your Lord, and your deity worthy of worship, Muhammad as the messenger, and Islam as your deen. You don't get invited into Islam without some level of acceptance and contentment of this. But then, are we all equal in accepting Allah as our Lord? Are we all equal in acknowledging and accepting the rububiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Part of this is accepting the decrees of Allah. Part of this is accepting the commands of Allah. Part of this is committing to the service of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Are we all equal? We're not equal. Therefore, that very definition, that very first phase will extend into the second and the third. And it entails them, and it is the most important, and it is the highest at the same time. To be pleased with Allah as your Lord, with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as your messenger, and with Islam as your deen. So this is the first rida. And once you have this rida, you will be granted the rida from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah will be pleased with you. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Nahl, من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فلنحيينه حياة طيبة ولنجزينهم أجرهم بأحسن ما كانوا يعملون. Whoever does righteousness, whether a male or female, من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن, while he is a believer, or he or she is a believer, فَلَنُحْيِيَنَّهُ حَيَاةً طَيِّبَةً, we will grant them a good life. حياة طيبة, a good life. وَنَجْزِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْرَهُمْ بِأَحْسَنِ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ, and we will grant them or recompense them the reward according to the best of their deeds. According to the best of their deeds. So that حياة طيبة, that sweet life, that good life, is basically guaranteed to people who do righteousness while in a state of belief. And that is particularly difficult for people to understand, because for many people they feel that their life is full of struggle and hardship. For many people they're having problems with their spouses all the time, and their car breaks down every other day. They are not making enough money, or they feel that their life is full of struggle. So how could it be true that they are having a good life? It depends on how much acceptance, how much they are راضي بالله عز وجل. The hadith of Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib, ذاق طعم الإيمان, he will just taste the Iman. It does not mean that he will taste the full sweetness of Iman. It is the hadith of Anas, when the Prophet ﷺ talks about وَجَدَ حَلَاوَةَ الْإِيمَانِ ثَلَاثٌ مَنْ كَانَ فِيهِ وَجَدَ حَلَاوَةَ الْإِيمَانِ. Three things, three qualities. Whoever has them will have the sweetness of faith. مَنْ رَضِيَ مَنْ كان الله ورسوله أحب إليه مما سواهما, أن يكون الله ورسوله أحب إليه مما سواهما. For Allah and His Messenger to be more beloved to one than anything else. And it's أحب إليه مما سواهما, that includes any other desire, any other wish. Not that you love Allah and His Messenger more than any other person. You love Allah and His Messenger more than any other thing. So you love Allah and His Messenger more than whatever wishes you have, or desires you have. You favor Allah and His Messenger over any desires that you may have. وأن يحب المرء لا يحب إلا الله, وأن يكره أن يعود في الكفر كما انقذ الله منه كما يكره أن يقذف في النار. To love his fellow man only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to go back into disbelief as much as one needs to be thrown into the hellfire. From the basic acceptance of Allah as your Lord, to Allah and His Messenger being more beloved to you than anything else, wealth, health, any external goods, any achievement, any accomplishment in life. You will not favor anything over Allah and His Messenger, and over Allah's wants and demands of you and His messengers. So from here to there is basically the story of your life. That is the distance that you will need to cover after you have accepted Allah as your Lord and deity worthy of worship, to the point where Allah becomes the most beloved thing to you, more beloved than anything else. That's the story of your life. That ayah in Surah Al-Haj, مَنْ عَمِلَ صَالِحًا مِنْ ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَىٰ وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَلَنُحْيِيَنَّهُ حَيَاةً طَيِّبَةً. Whoever does righteousness, whether male or female, while a believer, while he is or she is a believer, we will give them حياة طيبة, good life, life worth living, a life well lived, and we will recompense them the reward according to the best of what they have done. It goes all over the spectrum, because someone who accepted Allah as his Lord, the basic acceptance of Allah as his Lord, this ayah applies to them to some extent, because it is righteous to accept Allah as your Lord, and you have some faith. But again, it would not be fair to treat this person like the person who reached the end of the path. And for him, Allah and His Messenger are more beloved to him than anything else, than anyone else, and than anything else. A huge distance. Apply this ayah to this one and apply it to that one, and you will see the difference between al-Hayat Tayyibah here and al-Hayat Tayyibah there. There has to be a difference between al-Hayat Tayyibah here and al-Hayat Tayyibah there. And what makes it hard for us to understand also is that we think al-Hayat Tayyibah is a life full of fun and pleasure. and enjoyment and external goods like health and wealth and beauty. That's not a hayat tayyibah. That is a hayat tayyibah according to the many, but it is not a hayat tayyibah according to the wise. And it is not only about, it's not only about me preaching to you or trying to get you to think something that does not make sense. Even the philosophers, even Aristotle, the most influential philosopher in the history, most influential, considered to be most influential philosopher. But before Aristotle, even Plato, Aristotle's professor, Aristotle's teacher, they defined eudaimonia. Eudaimonia in Greek means a life well lived, a life worth living, or translated sometimes as human flourishing, human fulfillment. They defined eudaimonia as a life of virtue. According to Aristotle, it is a life of seeking the golden mean, a life of seeking the golden mean, which is the virtue that is between the vices of excess and deficiency. For us, it's al-Wasatiyya. Al-Wasatiyya. All virtues are right in the middle. Courage is right in the middle between, being irresponsible and reckless and being coward, and all virtues are right in the middle. Wasatiyya of Islam. A life in pursuit of that golden mean, right in the middle, the virtue between the two vices, is by definition eudaimonia, the good life, life worth living, a life well lived. It is not a life that is full of fun and pleasure and health, wealth, and beauty and all of the external goods. That is not a life well lived. That, according to the wise, that is not a good life to have lived. But it is a life of pursuing that virtue between the two vices. Allah, for us Muslims, it comes through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for the philosophers, this life, the life of seeking or pursuing the virtue between the vices, in and of itself, is an hayat tayyibah. But for us, we always go back to the first cause. We always go back to the Creator. Because there is nothing that is inherently good or bad or beneficial or harmful without Him. There is nothing that has might or power or influence, hawla or quwwah, without Him. So even the pursuit of virtue is not sufficient to give you the good life without Him. But He made the pursuit of virtue sufficient to give you a good life. He said in Surah Al-Nahl, من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فلنحيينه حياة طيبة. Whoever does righteousness, whether a male or female, while he's a believer, we will give him that good life. For the philosophers, eudaimonia. So, you understand what it? So it is just the difference between us and the philosophers is that we are saying, yes, we agree, a life of virtue is a good life by Allah and through Allah. And we're adding something to it, that this life of virtue has to be put on a foundation of what? وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ. While he's a believer. In order for you to reach complete human fulfillment and flourishing, you will have to base that life of virtue on a foundation of belief. And the philosophers can relate to this. They understand epistemic responsibility and they understand the importance of belief as a foundation, or the importance of, the rational thought as a foundation of action. So we believe that it is a life of virtue based on the foundation of belief, and then we believe that this is not inherently capable of granting you the good life, but Allah will grant you through it a good life. But it is granted, it is there. And if you don't understand it, go back in Surah Al-Nahl, go back like a verse or two before this, 2 verses before this. Start from, وَلَا تَشْتَرُوا بِعَهْدِ اللَّهِ ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا إِنَّمَا عِندَ اللَّهِ وَخَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ مَا عِندَكُمْ يَنْفَدُ وَمَا عِندَ اللَّهِ بَاقٍ وَلَنَجْزِيَنَّ الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا أَجْرَهُم بِأَحْسَنِ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. So start 2 verses before مَنْ عَمِلَ صَالِحًا, whoever does righteousness, whether male or female. Start 2 verses before this. You will understand from the context that this is not about beauty and health and enjoyment and fun. This is about life contentment. You will be able to sit with yourself and see your accomplishment and sort of be pleased with your accomplishment, your achievement in life. Be pleased with having recognized your Lord, having known your Lord, having served your Lord, who made you, who created you. So you go back 2 verses. The first one, وَلَا تَشْتَرُوا بِعَهْدِ اللَّهِ ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا. And do not trade the covenant of Allah for a cheap price. Do not sell the covenant of Allah for a cheap price. إِنَّمَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ وَخَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. Whatever Allah has is better for you if you only know. Whatever Allah has is better for you if you only know. So this is not a life of fun and pleasure. He's telling you, hold on to the covenant regardless of what happens, regardless of your suffering. Because holding on to the covenant will give you eventually the good life. And don't trade the covenant of Allah for a cheap price. And then the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, ما عندكم ينفد وما عند الله باق ولنجزين الذين صبروا أجرهم بأحسن ما كانوا يعملون. ما عندكم ينفد, whatever you possess, whatever you have, ينفد, will end, will be depleted. وما عند الله باق, and whatever Allah has is back, is everlasting. So compare what you have to what He has. He's telling you, don't sell, the eternal or the infinite for the finite. Don't sell the eternal for the temporary. And we will reward الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا. We will recompense the patient ones, their reward, according to the best of their deeds. We're talking about what? Patience, perseverance, endurance. And then he said, مَنْ عَمِلَ صَالِحًا مِنْ ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَىٰ وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَلَنُحْيِيَنَّهُ حَيَاةً طَيِّبَةً. Whoever does righteousness, whether male or female, while he or she is a believer, we will grant them a good life. If you go back to the siyaq wa sibaq, go back to the context, and the precedent or the preceding verses, you will find that we're talking about a completely different context from the one that people may think that this is what we're talking about fun, we're talking about enjoyment, we're talking about external goods. No, we were talking about the happiness that you will have inside, regardless of the external goods, regardless of the external, experience, your external experience. It is the contentment that you'll have inside, regardless of the external experiences. And this is not something only preachers say. Even like I said, the philosophers. Some of the philosophers go to the extreme, the Stoics go to the extreme of saying that it is with complete disregard to the external goods. The Stoics believe in this, with complete disregard of the external goods. And they believe that a life through pain, a graceful endurance of pain, is a life well lived, is a life worth living, is a life of achievement, accomplishment, a life that the living should be proud of it. The one who lived this life should be proud of it. And they say, regardless of the external goods, but wasatiyat in Islam, Islam is moderate in everything. The Prophet recognized that some things are, causes of happiness. Some things are causes of happiness. He said, for instance, that arba'un min sa'd al-mar'i, there are 4 things that are parts or ingredients to one's happiness, or they cause happiness, causes of happiness. And he mentioned, the good spouse, and he mentioned the good neighbor, and mentioned the spacious utilitarian residence or house, and he also talked about the markab al-hani, الصالحة والدار الواسعة والمركب الهني والجار الصالح والمركب الهني. So and he also so the good spouse, good neighbor, spacious house, and good mount, good car. So he recognizes that these things are good, that they make you happy. And if you can have them and have that happiness, could help you also be content with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and have them. But keep in mind, compared to that which Allah has for you in the hereafter, this is like the light of the candle next to the light of the sun. You just compare eternity. You compare eternity in infinite to finite. You compare eternity to transient existence. So yes, these things are good, but put the candle next to the sun. What do you see? And that, in that very example is also another example of the concept of fana. You do exist, but put the candle next to the sun. And even when it comes to fana, when we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator and the creation, that very example of the candle and the sun is just to make it sort of possible for us to comprehend. But it is an inappropriate one, because the candle and the sun are both creatures of Allah's creations. We're comparing two creatures, but that comparison is not appropriate. It is just for us, for our understanding. But when you compare the creature to the creator, that is a completely different thing. But put them, put the candle next to the light, to the sun, and see if the light of the candle will be of any significance. So whoever has this level of rida, whoever is pleased with Allah as his Lord, with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as his messenger, with Islam as his deen, will have al-Hayat Eudaimoni. Go back and read on Eudaimoni. Okay. Then he said the next level here is الدرجة الثانية الرضا عن الله وبهذا نطقت آيات التنزيل وهو الرضا عنه في كل ما قضى وقدر وهذا من أوائل مسالك أهل الخصوص. Second level, being pleased with Allah subhanahu with the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what the rida an Allah means here. Being pleased with the decrees of Allah. وبهذا نطقت آيات التنزيل. This is the rida that is mentioned in the Revelation. وهو الرضا عنه في كل ما قضى وقدر. This means to be content with all of the destinies and decrees, or destinies that He decreed. وهذا من أوائل مسالك أهل الخصوص. It is of the beginning stations on the path of the elites. ويصح بثلاثة شرائط, and it will be validated by three conditions. Okay, so to be pleased with all of the decrees of Allah, this is included in the first one. This is being pleased with Allah. Being pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as your Lord would mean that you have to be pleased with the decrees of Allah. We will need a few hours to talk about this, because we have a rida, acceptance of serene, tranquil, graceful acceptance of the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to spend a lot of time talking about this. But just remember three things. You will never be able to resist His decrees. Past, present, or future. You will never be able to resist His decrees. What you're trying to do when you take precautions and engage the causes is trying to work within the space that He gave you. And you're trying to work as He ordered, as He commanded you. That is what you're trying to do. Like, I'm just doing my best. Knowing quite well that what you know is very limited, and that what you're looking for, you're looking forward to, or what you're seeking may be bad for you, and what He decrees for you may be good for you. And knowing quite well that whatever decree befalls you, with acceptance, you will be able to mitigate most of the harmful consequences of that decree. Once you have accepted the decree, you mitigated the worst of consequences, which is for that decree to erode your iman, or to diminish your iman. Once you have accepted the decree, you have mitigated the worst of consequences. Alhamdulillah, you're safe now, once you have accepted this decree. It does not mean that you will not work to mitigate other harmful consequences of that degree. It just means that your acceptance already spared you the worst of consequences, basically to lose faith and to hurt your iman. So if we just understand these concepts, you will never be able to resist. So be accepting that which you cannot resist. Work, engage the causes, take your precautions, do your best, knowing that I am doing all of this within, my capacity, according to my limited knowledge. But whatever Allah chooses for me, I will be happy with what He chooses for me. Or content with what He chooses for me. Why did He say وَهَذَا مِنْ أَوَائِلْ مَسَالِكْ أَهْلِ الْخُصُوصِ? And it is at the beginning stations on the path of the elites. Why is this in the beginning stations? Why could that? He is not saying that the people at the end of this path will not have this, but it is a requirement to begin the path. This is like a requirement to start for the starters. You can't start the walk on this path without having this requirement. And like I said, He reserves the final phase or the final stage for people who are almost not there to feel pleasure or resentment. He then says that this is validated ويصح بثلاثة شرائط, and it's validated by 3 conditions. باستواء الحالات عند العبد, the evenness of all situations in the sight of the servant. The evenness of all situations in the sight of the servant. The evenness of all situations means that when it comes to the doing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all things are even. وَالشَّرُّ لَيْسَ إِلَيْكَ. Evil is not attributed to you. Yes, from your end, from your angle, they will not look even, and they will not feel even. And it is fine that they do not feel evil. However, deep inside you, this is the problem of evil types of thought. This is theodicy, the problem of evil. You're believing that this evil that you're seeing from your angle within the master plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not evil at all, because evil is not attributed to Him. It is evil to you. Without creating Iblis, without creating kufr and iman, without creating ma'asiyah and ta'ah, would many of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have manifested, like the attribute of justice, like the attribute of mercy, like the attribute of tawbah, being the tawwab, being the most forgiving? Would we have been able to exhibit many forms of ubudiyya or servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like tawbah, like striving, like resisting, like al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar? But there is a difference looking at the action from Allah's end and from your end. He is saying here, بِاسْتِوَاءِ الْحَالَاتِ عِنْدَ الْعَبْدِ, when all things are equal in the sight of the servant, or the evenness of all situations in the sight of the servant, from Allah's end, all things will be equal, right? From your end, they may not be equal and they may not feel equal, and that does not hurt your status with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to feel the pain and the suffering. We are not detached from humanity, because, like you cannot walk through, basically the pediatric ward and stone carrying and pretend that you're not seeing any suffering. Pretend that all those kids with cancer or terminal cancer, you pretended that this is just like seeing kids playing in the backyard. You pretended that all of this is equal in your sight. This is equal from Allah's end, because eventually the whole train is going to a good place. And eventually in the master plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, justice will be established, and mercy will supersede everything else. Allah's mercy will supersede everything else. From your end, it is not equal. And it is fine to not be equal, and it should not be equal. Because if from your end these things are equal, then you have no heart. If the Prophet ﷺ, if the Prophet ﷺ, when his grandson died, Zainab's son died, or when his own son died, look at, try to imagine that or perceive that image of the Prophet ﷺ. This is Ibrahim, his little son. He's basically in the moments of death, and the Prophet ﷺ has Ibrahim in his lap, his son in his lap, and he would hold him next to his chest, and he would kiss him, and يتشممه was basically to smell him, to get to touch and to smell him before burying him. And then, the Sahaba are around, and they see the tears coming down from the eyes of the Prophet ﷺ, and they wonder, what is this? And then the Prophet ﷺ says, إِنَّ الْعَيْنَ لَتَدْمَعُ وَإِنَّ الْقَلْبَ يَحْزَنُ وَإِنَّ بِفِرَاقِكَ يَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ لَمَحْزُنُونَ. So the eye, basically the eye weeps and the heart is saddened, or the heart, when the qalb yahzan, the heart is saddened or gets sad. And we are saddened by your departure, O Ibrahim, by being separated from you, O Ibrahim. Now, this is the most graceful rida, but because the Prophet ﷺ said what? وَلَا نَقُولُ إِلَّا مَا يَرْضَى رَبُّنَا or إِلَّا مَا يُرْضِي رَبَّنَا. And we say not but that which is pleasing to our Lord. We say not but that which is pleasing to our Lord. That image is the most beautiful image. It is much, much more beautiful and graceful than al-Fudayl ibn Iyad, for instance, laughing when his son died, to show acceptance of the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet's reaction is the perfect image. It is the most perfect human condition. It is to react in this way. He did not do this only for his son. He did this for his companions. He did this many times. When he visited Sa'd ibn Ubadah, and Sa'd ibn Ubadah outlived the Prophet ﷺ. But when he visited Sa'd ibn Ubadah, he was quite sick. And the family of Sa'd ibn Ubadah were quite distressed by his sickness, and the Prophet started to weep. Sympathy. He was sympathizing with the family of Sa'd ibn Ubadah, the family of his friend, because they are in distress. When the Prophet ﷺ visited the grave of his mother, who is not Muslim, he cried and he made everyone around him cry. That is the graceful, most beautiful form of acceptance of the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You still have a heart to, sympathize with human suffering and human condition in general. But you're not attributing any evil to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you know that in His master plan, evil is not attributed to Him. Evil is relative from our perspective, but from Allah's end, there is no evil that would ever be attributed to Him. And part of the plan, it's like the carpet that we talked about, the ant and the carpet. The ant cannot see the design of the carpet because of the ant's limited knowledge and limited sight. Okay, so باستواء الحالات عند العبد, then the evenness of all situations in the sight of the servant, you know what this means. It means from the end of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it also means that at your level, you will have the right response, the appropriate response, never displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But whatever befalls you will not distract you, because with more training and more riyada, spiritual training and riyada, all the events that take place in this dunya that will not harm your deen, will not harm your iman, will become less and less significant, will become smaller and smaller in your sight. So that is why the Prophet ﷺ, after he buried Ibrahim, radiallahu anhu, he just, what did it keep him from, his obligations, his duties, and towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, towards his ummah? No, it did not keep him. And it did not slow him down. And it did not distract him. So that is what it means to be even. Then he said, وَسُقُوطُ الْخُصُومَةِ مَعَ الْخَلْقِ, cessation of all disputation with the creations. Cessation of all disputation with the creations. سُقُوطُ الْخُصُومَةِ مَعَ الْخَلْقِ. Because to be pleased with the destinies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will compete with your potential. You will not compete against people. You will just compete with your potential. And that is fine. Competing with people also is a parallel competition. It is not basically an intersecting sort of like you have to bring them down. No, it is parallel competition, like the competition that was between Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhum. It's parallel competition. And there will be no disputation except for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this does not mean that you do not claim your rights. Because this is part of the virtuous society also, is when rights are granted to their rightful owners. It is part of establishing a righteous society. If people stop claiming their rights and people allow people to walk all over them, tyrants to walk all over them, that is going to create a very bad society for everyone, not for the individual, but for everyone. And then he said, وَالْخَلَاصُ مِنَ الْمَسْأَلَةِ وَالْإِلْحَاحِ, and riddance from demanding and doggedness. Demanding and doggedness. الْخَلَاصُ مِنَ الْمَسْأَلَةِ وَالْإِلْحَاحِ. You should never stop seeking Allah's help. You should never stop seeking Allah's help. You should never stop supplicating to Allah or invoking Allah. However, mas'ala from other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is certainly an insult to your deen. Mas'ala from other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is an insult to your deen. Ilhah or doggedness is two parts. To continue to repeat the dua is fine. Doggedness is to istajab. It is to hasten Allah, to be sort of to rush Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, to rush Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But to repeat the dua with complete serenity, and no istajab, no rushing. I still think that this is good for me, please grant it to me. Repeating it is fine, as long as you're not rushing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the doggedness that is prohibited. And then, trying to finish, inshallah. الدرجة الثالثة رضا برضا الله فلا يرى العبد لنفسه سخطا أو سخطا ولا رضا فيبعثه على ترك التحكم وحسن الاختيار وإسقاط التمييز ولو أدخل النار. الدرجة الثالثة الرضا برضا الله. The third level is basically when your ego has passed away, where there is no contentment or the resentment because there is no you. It is being pleased with Allah's pleasure, so the servant is no more seeing any personal entitlement to pleasure or displeasure, which motivates him or her to abandon the pursuit of control. You do not want to be in control anymore because you're completely pleased with Allah being in control. You're not seeking control. And what ruins our lives and our relationships and our institutions and our team sort of work and everything is that we're always wanting to be in control because we always think that we know what is best. I know what is best for the masjid. I know what is best for my community. I know what is best for the family. I know what is best for the company. I know, and you know what is best, and you trust yourself so much, you're happy with yourself so much, you're so arrogant, you're so just like whatever people say, or bad words, but then you want control. Because like you feel, and sometimes this is also mixed with, pseudo-piety and the sort of, that thinking of superiority and being the most righteous and being the most knowledgeable of the crew. So I want control. No, yes, do your best within your means, act upon your knowledge, but don't be too proud or arrogant. Understand your limitation, understand the limitations of your knowledge, even if you are Habrul Ummah. Anything short of the Prophet ﷺ. You may make mistakes. Just be humble enough to recognize that you made a mistake, even if you are Abdullah ibn Abbas or something, which you are not. And then وحسم الاختيار, to give up choice. Give up choice does not mean that you do not make choices. Give up choice when it comes to the commands and prohibitions of Allah, you're giving up choice completely. That is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَمْرًا أَن يَكُونَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَرَةُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِمْ. It is not appropriate for any believing man or woman, when Allah decrees a matter, that they have any choice afterwards. Where was this revealed? What was this revealed about? Marriage. Wanting to marry someone that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted you to marry someone and you did not want to. This is what it is about. So this is a decree, a religious decree. This is an imperative. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered you to do something, then you have no choice. But when it comes to the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, universal decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, احرص على ما ينفعك. Which means that you plan and you strategize and try to do احرص على ما ينفعك. Be keen on seeking what is of benefit for you. The hadith of Abu Hurairah, supported by Muslim, rahimahullah. So, المؤمن القوي خير محب إلى الله من المؤمن الضعيف. The strong believer is more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the weak one. And this is not just strength in belief, it is strength in general. So we're talking about the dunya here. احرص على ما ينفعك. Be keen on seeking that which is of benefit for you. It means that you will have ikhtiyar, but this ikhtiyar is not when it comes to aqdar, when it comes to awamir Allah Azza wa Jalla. With awamir Allah, you have no ikhtiyar, you have no choice. You comply. With aqdar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you try to do your best and to make the best choices, but then, delegate the final outcome to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِسْقَاطَ التَّمْيِيزِ, and drop all of his or her discernment, وَلَوْ أُدْخِلَ النَّارِ, even if they were led into the fire. We've talked about this concept before. So in the interest of time, we will not go back and address it, because it will take too long. But like I said, احرص على ما ينفعك. Be keen on seeking that which is of benefit for you, and then accept what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you.